The March 22nd, 2022 Committee on Ways and Means is now called to order. I will call on Councilmember Shealy for our invocation. Councilmember Shealy.
Thank you. Let us pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for all your many blessings. We come to you today asking for your guidance, your wisdom and support, and that you will help us as we start our Ways and Means meeting today. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion and fill us with your grace as we make decisions that will affect the citizens of Charleston, as well as our employees of the city of Charleston. We ask that you'll bring peace to the conflict in Ukraine, Lord. We pray for our world leaders and others who are attempting to bring peace. We pray for those that are refugees and those that are offering their homes as a safe place to stay. We ask that you'll bring peace and comfort to each and every one of them and protect them, and be with those who are staying to defend their country. Lord, we ask for your continued blessings on our city staff and the people of Charleston, for it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Item 2, approval of the minutes for March 8th, 2022. Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Bids and purchases.
Move for approval. Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item 4, budget finance.
Move for approval.
Discussion on items 4 and item 5, because we tend to go through millions of dollars in 15 minutes. And on this one, 5 is 38 million. If I may, I'd like for our CFO to come and talk a little bit about 4 and 5 and how do we accumulate those dollars in order to be able to fund the seawall. No, I'm asking the budget. I want, right. I mean, I know she knows the answer. I know the answer. I think that most people know the answer, but I don't think the public knows the answer. And I think it's very important when we go through our Ways and Means agenda that we don't rush through it as I've done in the past. I think it's time for us to discuss these millions of taxpayer dollars that we're allocating for a specific activity. So you will see a little different movement on the Ways and Means Committee as we move forward.
So item number 4 is a general ordinance for the overall bond that we will be issuing for the seawall, the low battery seawall project. And then 5 is the specific ordinance that kind of puts out all the guidelines for how we'll be paying it, the trustee agreements, all of that is what number 5 is. Up to $38 million. Not saying that that's what we'll borrow, it's just up to $38 million, depending on how it comes in and what the premium on the bond is, all of that. And that's how we will fund the remainder of the seawall project. And it's paid for with hospitality revenues.
And just as a follow-up, the 21 million that we used the last time, we've been accumulating dollars for the seawall for many years, okay? Could you explain that process so that especially the new council members will know how we did that?
So we were putting roughly $5 million in hospitality revenue fees away every year towards a project. And we're expecting a 10-year project length for that. And we would just continue to do that. So we do have an accumulation of funds to get us through probably October of this year. The project is moving along quicker than we thought. And so that's why we're going ahead to bond this with using the hospitality funds that we would have put away for it anyway, basically, to pay for the debt.
Any questions? If not, all in favor say aye. Thank you, Amy. Aye. The ayes have it. Pardon?
That's 4 and 5.
Yes,
So I
4
make
and
a
5
motion for 4 and
together.
5, because we just did 4, so I move that we make motion for 4 and 5. Yes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. The ayes have it. Item 6, Parks Department approval to deposit Palmetto Pride.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on that? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. 7, Parks.
Move for approval.
Any discussion on item 7? Council member?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am kind of interested in this one, on what exactly services we're getting. Is this on the front end to set us up to succeed with buying some property and then putting our services department out there? Is that what we're doing here?
Okay. Someone from Capital Projects will answer that for us.
Thank you.
So what we did was we put out a selection committee. Councilmember Shade was on it as well. And this was for professional services to basically do an inventory of what we have presently out there, all the different departments and divisions. Then to do a needs assessment of what do we need moving forward, looking out in the future, and then to put together a conceptual design. And we need that basically a program study so that we can have a contractor come in and give us a square footage cost so we can turn around and then ask for funding this project in the future. We honestly don't know what this is going to cost. There's a lot of needs out there. What we presently have is not well organized. So this is really the first step in the process. The following council will have a contract manager at risk contractor that will bring forth to accompany this one then.
Just a quick follow-up. I mean, don't know what our needs are, and we're not exactly sure where it's going yet either, right? Or is it going right back to where it is?
That land, we're leasing that land
Okay.
presently right now. So we would not go back in that same location.
Any more discussion? Mayor?
If I could just add, and particularly for our new council members, our present public works facility at Milford Street is, as just mentioned, a lease facility. This was a real estate transaction that occurred about 15 years ago or so, where the city sold the Milford Street property to the Magnolia Development, leased it back, and acquired a property over on Harmon and Herbert Street, part of which we're selling to the State Ports Authority, but we'll still have about 12 acres over there. And so we have an agreement with Magnolia that at any time now, they could give us a 3-year notice that we'd have to get off the property. And we don't anticipate that any day, but it could happen, say, in the next year or so. So this is the first step for us to analyze really what our, not just our current, but our future needs are in terms of everything that's currently transacting at Milford Street and plan for its relocation. It's pretty clear, we've talked about this before, that we're not going to even have enough real estate to do everything that we do now at Milford Street at this other location. But we're going to figure all that out as part of this process. They'll come up with a list of needs and even some future allowance, but say, okay, to make everything happen, y'all need about 5 more acres. I don't know what the number is going to be, but they'll come up with estimates about all that. Is that?
That's correct. And we'll have that information in about 6 months from now,
Right.
maybe a little less.
Great. Can we use the land for anything?
I'm sorry?
Can we use that land for anything? Because we're renting, right? Are we renting?
We're leasing
Leasing?
currently where it's at.
Okay. And my question is, can we buy it, or would we want to buy it? Does it have any specific use that the city might be able to use it for other than public service? That's just something to throw out there. I mean, we have time to think about it.
Yes.
I mean, the location is pretty good in terms of all the development that's going on in that area. And I'm just trying to see whether or not it's something the city would think about in terms of land for affordable housing. Mr. Mayor.
So, I mean, the whole deal from way back when was that our Milford Street property would be a part of the development. So I can't imagine that they want to sell it to us. They did, as part of that agreement, agree to give the city 2 acres for affordable housing. And we still anticipate getting that property. So there is a provision for us to get some land in the development. It won't be at Milford Street, but I think it'd be nearby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's why it's important for us to have these discussions. Councilmember,
I think Councilman Gregg had his hand up.
Councilmember Gregg.
Quick question. So you said there's 12 acres remaining here at the Harmon Street property. And then how does that compare to the existing Milford Street property? How many acres are over there right now?
So the existing Milford Street property is 16.35 acres.
Thank you.
We will be analyzing the Herbert Street property, which is presently 16.46 acres. However, there is a railroad land taking in process of 2.5 acres that we would lose off of that.
Okay.
And that would end up with just slightly below 14 acres.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilman Waring.
Thank you. Mr. Wills, can you go through, just kind of go down to the departments that you're trying to locate? I guess in the area that we will eventually have, I mean, we don't have it yet. And will the police department have areas to park cars? Is that part of this calculation or not part of this calculation? Study or whatever.
So the study, what we want to do is replace what's there right now. Okay, so you have environmental services, streets and sidewalks, and somebody help me out. No, I'm talking under public service. Stormwater, fleet operations, police radio, fire training,
Fire shop,
fire fleet, and then there's
the sign shop.
sign shop, and then there's where the police they blow up explosives in there. There's a small little area for that as well. Yeah, there's a lot packed into that area right there. There's a lot of lay down areas as well too.
It's a great piece of property. Councilman Shea.
Councilman Waring asked the same question I had, but I just want to follow up. I mean, I just heard the mayor say this, but the lease expires what date?
We don't have an expiration date. That my understanding is in the MOU or the agreement that they'll give us a 3-year notice. They have not given that to us yet. But as we know that there is a lengthy process with procurement and design. So it's in our best interest that we can start that as soon as possible.
I would just urge my colleagues, if you haven't gone out there to do so, particularly if you're on the real estate committee, Councilmember Pell, because everything that Mr. Mills just outlined to us is not really doing justice how complicated this process is going to be to relocate to another facility, or how we break it up into different properties for these other services to be incorporated at a different location. So I'm glad we're doing this, Mr. Mayor. I think this is an important step in addressing the needs of the city out there. So thanks for the discussion, Mr. Chairman. I'm ready to vote on it.
Any further discussion on item
one-
7?
one last-
Item 6, right? 7, right? Item 7.
One last question, Mr. Moose. I've heard about it, I haven't seen it. I heard that North Charleston built a really, really good public service department. Have you had a chance to look at it, or do you think it'd be worth going up?
I have not looked at it, but as part of this design contract, we are going to visit multiple facilities. And yes, North Charleston just finished up theirs, so we plan on visiting there. I think the county is still kind of wrapping up their design or starting theirs. And I understand that City of Savannah just finished up theirs. That was a $43 million project. So we're planning on going to that site as well with city staff to visit that and understand how they did it.
Thank you.
Mayor.
I just wanted to add that when I was up in Greenville, Mayor White was so kind to give me a tour of their new facility, and has even offered to give us design plans and everything. They have a really nice facility up there, so we'll include that on the list.
Any further discussion? If not, you ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it on item 7. Item 8. 8 and 9 together on resiliency and
It's a motion.
we're taking,
Okay, I second it.
okay, we're taking 8, 9, and 10 together. Is that the motion? Okay, all right. It's been seconded. Moved and seconded. Okay. All in favor of item 8, 9, and 10, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Item 11, housing and community development.
I'm gonna move for approval.
Any discussion, questions on item 11? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Item 12. I heard a second on 12. Okay, discussion. Just had a couple of questions. I think some of these are tied to our, what is it, kind of LEAF program, the new LEAF, what do we call it? Turning LEAF program. Yeah, okay. It would be great for us at some point, and maybe not today, to just get a sense of the successes of the program in terms of the investments that we've made and the kind of return that we're really getting on it. I think it would be great at some point for someone to give us some background information on the where, what's, and whens. Councilman Bowers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to speak on all these, but I'm sure Amy from Turning Leaf or Turn 90 would love to come and update us on these. I can tell you from my personal experience representing clients who have gone to Turning Leaf that it does make a tremendous difference. In each of these investments that are being made, whether this money is coming from a grant or whether we are allocating this money to go to Turn 90, these are the kind of things that prevent crime in the future. Having a viable reentry program that is not just turning people back out on the street, but gives them the therapy that they need, the job training that they need, and the resume building that they need, so that they're not just, some business owners not just taking a chance right on this person off the street, having no idea who they are. Oftentimes that means they don't give them that chance. And that person just goes right back into crime. And the other two things that we're going to be voting on are sort of cutting edge technology in policing, in forensics, that is going to help solve crimes. It's going to help get convictions at trial, and it is going to take dangerous people off the street. And these are the kind of things that we need to be focusing on that are going to be sort of long-term, really boons to our community. And so I'm just really happy to see these items on our agenda tonight and the direction that our department's going in.
Thank you for that, council member. Any other? Yes, Councilman
Yeah.
Shea.
So we normally have Amy appear at our Public Safety Committee meeting, so I will coordinate with the clerk on bringing her back in to the public safety. We haven't had one in a while. There's time for, I tried to get her scheduled, and we had a conflict with her before, so we'll get her back for the Public Safety Committee meeting next time around, and we'll report then.
And because I think it's important for us to let the public know what we're doing in that area and the successes in particular in that area in terms of especially fighting crime. Thanks for that explanation, Councilman.
And Mr. Chairman,
yes.
just for the record, item number 13, the request from the police department is that you got it.
That's on me. That's on me. I'm sorry. We haven't voted yet. Okay. I offer an amendment to item 13. There has been a request submitted by the police department that we amend item 13 on the agenda due to an update budget request from Justice Assistant Grant Program. The amount of the grant application and city match needs to be increased from $24,454 with a city match of $2,040 2,446 to 30,508 with a city match of 3,058. That's a difference of $612. That's all we're talking about here, guys. The exigent circumstances behind this amendment is that the deadline for the grant, which would provide to our police department a row of multi-spectral cameras and related equipment, is due on March 25th of this year. Do I hear a motion to amend?
Second.
Moved and properly second. All in favor of amending item 13? Aye. Now let's take these items together. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Item 15, request to allocate funding to the Lake Doterra Outfall project from the city drainage fund. And I think we had some discussion on that from Councilman Shuey at our last council meeting. You work fast. I have to learn. Go ahead,
Thank you,
Scott.
Mr. Chairman. What I'd like to do is take the recommendation that the Public Works Committee had yesterday out of their committee, which was to allocate $1.3 million plus a 15% contingency from the drainage fund for Lake Daughter Alternative Outfall Project. And the reason for that amount is this is a match that is a request that we've made to Charleston County that they'll be discussing for the other 1.3 million.
Okay, so we're not going to be allocating the 2 million something, I think it was for that.
It was
project.
originally about 2.6 million.
Right.
And, you know, we have, a few of us have spoken to some county council members and some county staff, and there's a possibility that they will be voting and coming up with the other half of this. So we've got a halfway match, basically.
Could you state your amendment then?
Yeah. Let's see. I want to make the motion that we approve the allocation of $1.3 million plus a 15% contingency from the drainage fund for the Lake Daughter Alternative Outfall Project.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any further discussion or questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Item, yes? We're on 16. If you so desire, as a council. Okay.
All right, yesterday afternoon, the real estate committee met. We discussed 3 items. The first 2 items had to do with Charleston Water Systems. First one was an agreement, memorandum of agreement with CWS regarding the Penn 3A water transmission main project, essentially a new water transmission line in the upper neck portion of the peninsula that sailed through unanimously after receiving a very informative technical explanation from our legal counsel as well as CWS staff. The second item was a revised lease agreement with CWS regarding the West Ashley Greenway to facilitate future cooperation with CWS as it pertains to things like wayfaring, signage, and other improvements that have been talked about for decades, frankly, along the Greenway that haven't really happened. And this lease is the first step towards facilitating that sort of arrangement. So for the folks that don't know, who may be watching at home, the West Ashley Greenway is actually owned by Charleston Water Systems. It's a major sewer utility corridor, and the city leases that area for a passive park. And obviously, we got all these things we want to do out there, but CWS has a very important job to do as well. And we need to make sure we balance all that and facilitate that. And that's what this lease does. And we will be engaging with the community in the coming months and years when it comes time to actually start implementing specific projects. We want to make sure that everyone's on board on this, the neighborhoods, the various stakeholder groups, and of course, CWS as well. We closed off the meeting with a very thorough discussion with the Charleston Children's Museum regarding their proposal to quitclaim the property that the city owns where they're currently located in order to help them facilitate some financing for some pretty substantial upfits at the museum. There was a sort of a recognition that there might be some other options out there, short of the city just conveying the property over to this group for free. We all are in violent agreement that we want to help the Children's Museum do what they want to do, but we're also cognizant of just essentially assigning away for nothing some very, very valuable real estate downtown. So my recollection, the way we left it was we deferred the matter for further discussion. I think there's some very smart, experienced folks on our real estate committee, not including myself, that are going to study this a little bit more, reach out to some of their contacts to see if there's some ways we can come up with some alternatives to make this work. And that was about it.
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be my question. We're giving away assets. And how does that affect our bottom line in terms of the total worth of the city? And that can affect things down the line in terms of our borrowing capacity, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm glad that you deferred.
Oh, absolutely. And absolutely. And there's a lot of other issues that could be implicated by the city giving away this land and having it mortgaged. What happens if, God forbid, something happens to the museum? They're not able to pay their bills. Bank's going to foreclose on that property. We can't let that happen.
I mean, the one thing I would say is that I think that the facility is a great facility and it is necessary. Those who have children have probably taken them there. And it's a place that children really, really have a good time and have fun.
Absolutely.
Councilman Sheet.
To the point that Councilmember Chairman Appel was bringing up about the foreclosure. And I think this was a question that Councilmember Boyd brought up about what happens in the event if this contract includes a reverter clause and it is foreclosed because of the reverter clause. And I'm looking at Julia to correct me if I misstate this, but if they default on the mortgage, on the loan, and with the reverter clause, the property comes back to the city with a mortgage, with the unpaid balance. And that's something we just need to take into consideration as I mentioned to the folks they did a wonderful job with their presentation yesterday, that we have sort of reverter-itis problem.
I was about to say.
And one of the items that we took up on the lease or on a deed was a reverter clause dealing with property back in 1921, when the recipient of the property did not use the property as intended. So it should have reverted to the city. And then, of course, we got the pending litigation with the city, with the Charleston School of Law. So there's some kinks that need to be worked out. Councilmember Appel said this very eloquently. We all chimed in, offering our support for the museum. We want it to be successful. We want to help out. So we got some issues I think we still need to be addressing before we go forward on it.
Okay, thank you. Any more discussion? Yes, Councilman.
Thank you, Chair. So Councilman Appel, Chair Appel, is this going to be brought up at a subsequent meeting in terms of like what to do with them, or is there a discussion around relocation, or just thinking creatively how to keep them there?
I'll keep them.
It's my understanding that it's more the latter.
Okay.
And it would be my expectation that once we actually have some answers to some of these questions fleshed out, that they're more than welcome, the museum's more than welcome to come back before the real estate committee for discussing those items.
All right. The other, just to follow up to that, in discussions with them, they had mentioned to me several times that the term museum is oftentimes confusing to folks. It's really not a museum. It's an active play for children to play. So oftentimes when we compare our visitors, we're comparing our other visitor museums, and it's not apples to apples. So I guess my point is, as these discussions continue, I would say that Charleston's probably in the minority. Many places, Greenville, Asheville, support these children's museums because they're not just providing services to kids that pay, they're providing services to many of our schools, Title I schools downtown. So a relocation would be detrimental, but I also think potential city match on some funding would go a long way because they do bring in revenues and they are looked at in a different regard than just a museum. They really are a place of education and learning for kids.
Okay. Any further discussion on this item? Council member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, and Council Member Appel, Chairman Appel was kind enough to let me join in a little bit on the discussion yesterday. I just think for all of us just to understand what the underlying issue is with all this, the Children's Museum doesn't want to go anywhere. We don't want them to go anywhere. They've been in that building a long time. The lease that they have right now still has a run of 36 years left on it, plus or minus. Am I right about that? 36 years. It's a long time. Long time. 47 more years. So the issue that they brought, and 2 board members came and spoke, gave a presentation, is they want to do about $4 million worth of upfits that they've already basically designed. I believe they told us yesterday they've got preliminary approvals to go. What they don't have is the money, and what they didn't necessarily want to do is come back to the city and say, it's your building, do it. And their representation to us, which I think is going to not be challenged, but just go back and backed up, is that they need to own the property to get a loan on that building, and that the lease doesn't serve as proper collateral. So that's the question that was left open at the real estate committee and will be for this council as well. And I think one of the things that came of it is that we need to work with them now to figure out how the best way to finance this deal is. I think we're going to learn that it's to sell them this building with a very easy and simple reverter. If it's not a children's museum, it comes back to us. Because if they mortgage, even with a lease, the mortgage is going to have as part of its collateral, among other things, not just the value of the lease, which is not really collateralized, it's the building. So if they default, even as a leaseholder, banks can come back up to the building anyway. So I think that I kind of state where that was, Mr. Mayor. And so I think there's sort of a divide as to where this is going to go, but no divide on whether or not this is something we want to support. Keep the Children's Museum where it is. They did present us some numbers about how many people come and visit. They do keep a track of where people come from. They also talked about how many schools they go into. They are not just a museum. They are also an educational facility that goes out into schools all over the county, I think, and all over the region. So we'll get them back here once it sort of gets sorted out through Councilmember Appel's committee and get them going, but sooner rather than later, because it's not getting any cheaper to upfit a building, right? So I think there is some sense of urgency. So thank you.
And so the real estate committee deferred that. Am I correct?
That is correct, Mr.
And so
Chairman.
the other items are items A and B. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was a robust discussion, as Chairman Appel said. Out of that was a suggestion, actually from Councilmember Seekings, that maybe the board of the Children's Museum should have 1 or 2 city council people on. Because at the end of the day, if debt is secured, directly or indirectly, the city's going to be involved. Somebody needs to have the eyes and ears over those books, if you will, or as those decisions are being made, that has the city's interests at heart. Taking the example of a foreclosure on the property, we shouldn't be in a position in the event that that were to happen, worst case scenario, of finding out the worst case scenario at the worst time. Usually people get into foreclosure because of cash flow problems. And if you have eyes and ears around the table, maybe you can help prevent cash flow problems. So that's a structural piece that I think the museum needs to work with. I thought it was a very good idea. As a matter of fact, who suggested?
No. Yeah. I suggested the idea, but I think the 2 people who were volunteered were council members Bowden and Appel because of their current and by the way, very soon to be current and pending situation as parents, as in like maybe tomorrow.
So that point about coming in with the white cape when a crisis is afoot, we should be there well in advance of that. Okay, so I hope they would follow up on that suggestion because I think there's a way the city can help. Everybody feels there's a way the city can help besides giving away the asset.
I appreciate, and I can think of someone that I think would be great, and that is Councilmember Saccharin as one of the 2. You know, just based on just based on his background, just throwing it out there, Council. Okay. So we're voting on A and B, right? Do I hear motions?
That's correct.
Moved and properly seconded. Any further discussion on item A and B? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, the ayes have it. Now we come back to item 16. And before we get into voting and all that, let's just have some discussion. And Mayor Tecklenburg.
My colleagues, thank you for your attention to this matter. You know this expression that sometimes it's important to keep your eyes on the prize of what's important. In this case, I believe what's important is the city's efforts to assist those who are experiencing homelessness or are at risk of falling into homelessness. I believe personally, when I'm judged, it will be partly on how I've treated those least of my brothers and sisters. And I think you can extend that to a city as well, that we're judged by how we care for those most in need. So I really don't want a personal issue to get in the way of y'all keeping focus on what I think is the prize here, and that's how we're helping those experiencing homelessness. So I'm going to abstain from voting on this matter this evening, so as to disallow any confusion by the fact that my son's real estate company happens to be a tenant in the property. If respectfully, if y'all will allow me to speak for just a couple of minutes, though, not about the property, but about our efforts over the last few years about homelessness, so I can accentuate kind of where we are with this. And then I think both from a public safety point of view and then from a housing and housing point of view, that both Chief Reynolds and Gianna Shaw Johnson would like to weigh in. So I've been around this issue most of my life because I was recruited by my mother when she was on city council to be a volunteer at the YMCA on Cannon Street, where which was where the homeless shelter was for cold weather. And my mom and Mayor Riley and other council members would often staff the YMCA on Cannon Street. So with that recruitment, I ended up volunteering and becoming the president of Crisis Ministries, which the city helped form in the 80s. And so for a couple of years, I was president of that organization. They have now turned into 180 Place, which does a remarkable job. They are great. And in fact, we're partnering with them, hopefully finally going to break ground this year on Upper Meeting Street on to build some transitional housing for the clients of 180 Place, which is great. But the thing is, they don't serve everyone who's experiencing homelessness in our community. And there was no greater evidence of that fact than when I got elected and sworn in January of 2016, and there were hundreds of tents underneath I-26. We called it, we had a tent city here. For whatever reason, those homeless individuals were not getting services from 180 Place. And that exists to this day. And it impacts public safety as well, because for whatever reason, not everybody's cut out to be a client of 180 Place. And that led, after we dealt very proactively for about a 6-month period to find housing for those that were in Tent City, to create what we have been calling the Navigation Center at 529 Meeting Street, which is a property that we don't own. And if y'all haven't been to the Navigation Center, I highly recommend you go there and see what we have going there and our plans for improving those services. But basically, it's wraparound services led by nonprofits to minister to those experiencing homelessness. And we want to focus in the future a little more on those who are at risk of becoming homeless. So the city council approved for this year's budget a little bit of addition to staffing, because we felt that the city needed to take a more direct oversight role in the operation of the Navigation Center. Some of the nonprofits come and go, and we just felt like we needed to have a steadier presence there. So we've actually recently hired a Navigation Center. Of course, the proposal is to call it the Hope Center in the future, but we've added staff. So next, if I mentioned that this ties in to public safety. I don't know about y'all, I still get calls and pictures all the time of citizens who they want to help the homeless, but they also in a way are just complaining and fearful of those who are experiencing homelessness. It's not a crime, by the way, to be homeless. And we very proactively will issue tickets and arrest individuals, whether they're homeless or not, for breaking the law. But it's not against the law just to be homeless. But it is a public safety issue, and that was part of the issue at Kent City as well. So I think Chief Reynolds is on the line and wanted to share a few comments about that, and then we'll turn it over to Gianna. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I want to just, I hope I'm not digressing too much, but I will also comment, Turning Leaf and Turn 90. I wanted to get on earlier and I wasn't able to get on, but the idea of disrupting the pipeline to prison, what they're accomplishing with job training and resumes and employment and reducing recidivism. Amy Barch, who runs that program, is amazing. I really believe she's kind of cracked the code in reducing recidivism. There's others in Columbia, the governor and my counterparts in Columbia PD, Richland County Sheriffs, and others who now have embraced that program, which started here in Charleston and now is expanded up to Columbia. And I know the University of Chicago and others have a lot of interest in what they're doing. So it's a very successful program. I think it would be great to be briefed on the details of this past year and just the data and some of the strategies. But I've personally sat through their training classes. And it's amazing what they're doing and what they're accomplishing. So I agree with all the comments from before. Reference to the Hope Center and the acquisition of this property and making it more permanent, what we're doing with the Navigation Center. I couldn't be more supportive of what the mayor's trying to accomplish, what the city's trying to accomplish, what Gianna has been working on for years. We can't arrest our way out of this problem. When you look at the issue, there's a need for capacity. There's a need for alternative resources than just arresting people, responding to calls for service. And just those things are extremely important, but we need to have a more permanent solution, more capacity, more resources to address this problem, which is a real quality of life issue. It's gotten a lot of attention from a lot of people. And I think this is a great initiative. When you look at national efforts for what policing is doing around the country and public safety in general, it's to try to find alternatives. The police cannot do everything for everybody all the time. How are we involving our partners? How are we engaging and collaborating with others in the schools, with mental health issues, with the hospitals, with people that are in crisis, people that need help, that need intervention, that need training, that need counseling and other things. And this accomplishes that. I think it's a step in the right direction, and I think it will help, in addition to everything else we're doing, make our city safer and protecting and serving our residents and our tourists and our businesses.
Thank you, Chief.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. Some of what I was going to mention has been mentioned by the chief, but I wanted to highlight a few things for your information. Oftentimes we think of homeless persons as those persons that are living on the street, which they are, those that are living under our bridges, those that are living in our garages that we literally see with our eyes on the street. I would tell you today, those are not our only homeless persons. The Department of Housing and Urban Development defines homelessness different from what homelessness actually is. Homelessness is also that mom with the children that is couch surfing, that is living with grandma or living with auntie, who do not have a permanent residence or a permanent, address. Homelessness is our city employees who called our office over the last 3 months, working folks that have nowhere to live. Homelessness is the lady that I helped last week who called and said, I need help. I'm living in my car with my 2 children and my dog, and I need somewhere to live because it's going to be cold tonight. She was not wanting to go to any of the shelters that we have up. So I called a nonprofit that I knew and I said, can you pay for a hotel for the weekend? Fortunately, I was able to get that chief executive officer who agreed, in fact, to do that. We then asked that individual to go to the Navigation Center on Monday to make sure that she could get connected with services that would ensure that she and her children and their dog did not have to live in their car beyond last Monday. And we were successful in doing that. We were successful because we had a location that we could send this resident to help her find safe, decent, and affordable housing. And so as we think about the acquisition of 11 Cunnington Street, I want us to consider those dynamics. We need a location where we can relocate what is now referred to as the Navigation Center so that we can continue and enhance these services. We currently have a nonprofit organization at the Navigation Center who's doing a good job. We need to do a better job. We need full engaged services to ensure that the city of Charleston can meet functional zero. What does that mean for us? That means anyone who becomes homeless can very quickly be rehoused. That is our goal. We've been engaging and having conversations with a number of partners over the last year. And I would say to us council members, and you probably know this already, COVID-19 exacerbated this issue. We have, if you look at Charleston County and the number of folks that have asked for rental assistance, the numbers are up exponentially. You all approved through our CARES Act funding monies that went to 7 different organizations, and literally of those 7, half turned around, asked for more money soon after we gave them the allocation of approximately $50,000, because the issue is real. If you looked at 60 Minutes this past Sunday, they talked about the millions of housing that is needed in the United States of America. And so I would say to us, naturally, homelessness is directly correlated to the lack of housing. But I would say to you, housing alone will not solve our homelessness issue. If we do not have the appropriate wraparound services to ensure the long-term success for these individuals, we will continue to see them on the bridges. In fact, I would challenge us and say that we'll see more of them on the streets. And you all know who call me or who text or email my staff inappropriately to address concerns in the community. This is a methodology by which we can address these concerns for the long term. As it relates to 11 Cunnington, I approached this organization because it is located next to property that the city closed on. I was excited because when I walked in, I envisioned the Navigation Center or those services being there. It can literally accommodate right now what we need to have in relation to providing services to our homeless individuals. So as you contemplate your decision, I ask that you would give all of that thought. I would also say to you, you all have a copy because I emailed it to you, and I believe it was also in your council packet. The new appraisal that was requested of us, we have that available to you. $1,650,000 is the new value that came in under a different appraisal organization, which again is higher even than the last appraisal. But beyond even that, this site will help us meet the needs that we have without a delay in services to this population. Additionally, almost 80% of the funding that is going towards this acquisition is non-city funding. The Mayor's Commission on Homelessness and Affordable Housing which is comprised of City of Charleston, City of North Charleston, the town of Mount Pleasant, and the town of Somerville have actively been engaged in a donation campaign towards getting a Hope Center up and running because they recognize the need, are in support of it. Thank you.
Question?
Sure.
Just a couple.
Okay.
As we proceed. So the only way that the wraparound services can be provided, okay, is from us because 180 doesn't provide wraparound services?
Yes, 180 provides wraparound services, but 180 is not meeting the need of all of the homeless persons that we see on the streets, under the bridges, et cetera, et cetera. They absolutely provide wraparound services. In fact, we're working in concert with some of their outreach team, along with we have a 1-member outreach team at the moment to go out on the streets because studies have shown and evidence have shown that as you have outreach and you can build a rapport with those on the streets, the likelihood that they will receive services is higher.
And a couple more questions. The due diligence, and I think I raised this before, in terms of how we got where we are. I mean, how many more properties did we look at? What were the prices, the benefits? Just so the council get a sense of the kind of due diligence we went through to get to Cunnington. I mean, how many other buildings did we look at? How many other buildings at 1.3, 1.5 million that we look at that might be available to sort of make the determination that Cunnington is the best?
So, Councilmember, this has been going on for several years now that we've been at 529 since probably 2017. So I have spoken to many realtors, looked at a number of sites, 2 sites in the neck area. And before I go any further with that, what I was looking for was buildings that someone would give us versus us having to pay because we didn't have the capital and the funding to facilitate acquisition at the time. So we looked at one building that one of the Mayor's Commission members, their church had available at 591 Rutledge Avenue. We could not pursue that for a number of reasons. That particular church was engaged and embroiled in some other matters that needed to be cleared up, even though it was vacant at the time, that we didn't think it was appropriate to look at. There were 2 parcels in the neck area that we looked at that another nonprofit partner referred to us. I felt like they were too far up and that those who needed the services the most would not be able to access them. At the time, those properties were in the $700,000-$800,000 price range. That was approximately pre-COVID, about 2 years ago now. We were in conversations most recently with the folks on St. Margaret Street, Florence Crittenton. They are looking at doing something different with their property. And so my team had conversations with that executive director around what that could look like. That property, they were anticipating that it would be in excess of $1 million+ for acquisition. They also advised that it required $2+ million in monies to repair that building in order to facilitate and accommodate what we thought would be necessary there. And so there have been others over the years, but there have been factors primarily related to money that did not allow us to go after any of those properties that we mentioned. And more importantly, making sure that the properties would meet the need of this clientele and also blend well into the community. Because if I can just be frank, everybody does not embrace homelessness. Most of our citizens, if they see homeless people, don't want to be bothered with homeless people. And so versus having to deal with that issue, we wanted to be cognizant of where we located and ensure that these folks had the freedom and ability to come and go as necessary to enable themselves to go to a higher level in their livability.
If this thing doesn't pass tonight, knowing you as a manager, okay, you've thought it through in terms of potential alternatives. Do you have any alternatives just in case this thing doesn't pass tonight?
So if you all choose not to approve this, we're going to stay where we are for a time, go back to the owner, They have been checking with me more often. As I said to you all before, they've been quite gracious in allowing us to lease this for $1 a year. And Matt Froelich, our assistant CFO, would say it didn't cost just $1, Gianna. We've been paying other costs related to that building. Right now, the HVAC in particular upstairs does not work. It has 2 very large HVAC systems, neither work very well. When we initially went in that building several years ago, we made some small repairs to it and have done some things over the year to help maintain the building. So we will stay there. We will have to make repairs to that building. And then we will continue to look for another location. We have some in mind, but they are not fitting that need, if I can just be frank. So we will have to employ other professionals, realtors. We have one under contract now to help us find a location. And I would just remind our council members, nothing's inexpensive in the city of Charleston right now, nothing. We bought 357 and 9 Cunnington. It was valued at $1,625,000. We were fortunate to acquire it for $1,425,000 or so. We had looked at that property 7 years ago before we bought it last year. And so we've been looking, because part of what we do in seeking to enhance affordable housing is attempting to find land. Land is extremely expensive in the city of Charleston. And if you're looking at a building, you are going to look at very high costs, especially right now, to renovate that building and bring it to a standard where you would have folks come in.
And your thought with regard to including the Hope Center, Housing Opportunities for People Everywhere Center,
Okay.
Within your new construction. What are the advantages of doing it that way versus having sort of a separate Hope Center from the new construction that we're considering?
Yes, sir. We thought of that initially when we were looking at the number of units that could be built at Cunnington at 357 and 9. It was thought that we could maximize the number of affordable units on that site. And possibly if we had to use that ground floor for some kind of office space that we could rent out, because 11 Cunnington, or the Hope Center, is not a profit producing center. And so in order to ensure that we can sustain it for the long term, the thought was that we could possibly rent out some bottom space at our units if we had to do that in order to help sustain Cunnington Avenue. And we thought, because of all of the reasons that we mentioned a few minutes ago, around stigma, we thought it was important, and because of the efforts of the Mayor's Commission, that the center have its own identity. And so that's why we thought it appropriate to leave it separate.
And the last question that I have, if we do vote to buy,
Yes, sir.
and we start our construction on housing for people 80% and below, including the homeless, do you see that building, because of the nature of what we're doing, going down in value considerably?
I don't. I'm not an appraiser by any means. Right now, 180 Place, as the mayor mentioned, they're about to build 70 new units of affordable housing, and literally all around that is market rate housing. If we've gone on Meeting Street, we have multiple rental apartments, market rate, every single one of them, that are seemingly doing just fine without the devaluing, if you will, of the properties as they are.
Sorry, I don't want to monopolize. Councilman Shade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Gianna, thank you for that presentation. Like you, Mr. Mayor, I remember the first time I went to what's now called 180 Place. I think I got recruited by maybe the same person, or maybe it was our Aunt Pauline Satilli got me involved in spending the night at a homeless shelter. I think it was at the Cannon Street YMCA was where we initially did it. And it was a scary experience, something I never had the opportunity to do before. But you walked out of there with a better sense of understanding the plight of folks who live on the street. And I appreciate, Gianna, your further definition of what homeless really means. And I think it's important for us to understand that. I haven't been able, and not to the point that I should, participate more in serving the homeless that I think we all need to do. And you truly are doing God's work, Joan, and I mean that in all sincerity. We were charged with clothing the naked, feeding the hungry, and housing the homeless. And homelessness, as you were describing, goes beyond a person living on the street. And I think Councilmember Waring made this comment yesterday at a Public Works Committee meeting that our two biggest challenges, and I'm not sure which one takes priority over this, flooding issues and housing. And it's not just homelessness, and it's not just affordable housing, it's attainable housing. And I listened to that 60 Minutes presentation that you just referred to as to how rents have gone up in Jacksonville, Florida by 30%. And I have children who are in the age of buying houses and looking for affordable housing as well, and they want to stay within the city. And it is getting more difficult by the minute. I think we all are very much in tune with the problem that we're trying to face and trying to address. And Mayor, you were faced with that challenge your first, I think maybe the first week in office, as I recall that. And there was a lot of controversy because I think at that point, 180 Place had changed some of its criteria on taking in homeless folks. This is a serious issue in our community, and I know that we need to address it. And I think part of the problem that I'm having on approving the acquisition of this property for this price is because I think we all understand the cost of this seems to me, and I've read the second appraisal, out of whack. I said that the first time when this came up. And I went back and looked at the minutes of our meeting that we had back on February 22nd. And there's apparently some miscommunication with this because I thought I asked this question, but going back, Councilman Bowden asked, what is the purpose of the motion to defer? We haven't approved these minutes yet, but this is what I'm reading. And he said, is it for the purpose of an appraisal or is it for airing out of grievances we're talking about? And Councilwoman Waring responded, no, the purpose initially in real estate and now here to negotiate a better price. And I think that's sort of where I'm stuck with on this issue. And I read the second appraisal and now I'm not sure how, I know how they did. I know how they came up with 1.6 million. My question then is this, have we attempted to negotiate a better price below the 1.3 million?
We have not, council member. When I went in the offices of Clement Crawford and Thornhill and spoke with Stewart, and I said, Stewart, this building is great. Can I buy it for the Hope Center? He looked at me strange, but then he said, well, Gianna, we'll have to look at that. He came back to me with a value of 1.4, 1.5 million. So in fact, council member, I thought I had gotten a better deal by the 1.3 based on that conversation and information he sent to me, attempting to validate the initial price that he quoted. So there hasn't been any further conversation relative to decrease in price.
What is the immediate concern that you have regarding getting kicked out of our existing facility? You mentioned that there's going to be some money spent to do some necessary repair work. How much longer do we have realistically in that facility?
Honestly, I do not know. I need to be back in touch with Mr. Kaplan's representatives to find out. They own the property next door, the older Copleston Cleaners building. They have been looking at strategies for a number of years now, including a possible grocery store in that area. Rob has just called me more often and said, how far are you? How close are you to locating a place? And so I would have to determine, in fact, where they are and when they're ready for us to fully move. We have asked them if they would at least give us 90 days before they ask us to get out.
That's the minimum I think they should give us is 90 days. They should give us a full year if nothing else along the lines. I still have my reservations about purchasing this property, and it goes back to I dabble in real estate and I took care of my family's real estate holdings when my father died. I dealt with the cost and the expense of real estate and the appraisals of real estate and understand the mechanism of all of this. And I know that property in Charleston has gone kind of out of whack. I shouldn't say kind of, it is a little bit out of whack. I'm still wrestling with the idea of spending $1.3 million for this property. It is in a was sort of an industrial area, still somewhat of an industrial area. It was used as a crematorium. I knew the family who owned the property beforehand. His son-in-laws works in my office, so I know the history of this property and when those houses were built over there. It is surrounded by cemeteries that have been there, I guess, since the 19th century, when that was just cheap land, I guess, back in the neck area. So what they paid for the property, the improvements they made on the property, and the cost of what they're offering for us on it, I'm still just not convinced it's the right price for that. I would have hoped that we would have been able to sit down with the owners to see if they'll be willing to come down on the price. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are my comments right now.
Just clarification. So on, so you had mentioned that you were already planning on leasing out the ground floor of the Hope Center. So when it gets built, you would lease that?
No.
Maybe I misunderstood that.
No, what Councilmember Gregory asked me is why we weren't locating the Hope Center in the newly constructed apartment complex.
Okay.
Yes, and so that was considered, but we, in my conversations and us evaluating this, which that hasn't been constructed yet, was to attempt to have some level of rental space in our units, in the housing, in the apartment complex that we could rent out to help support the Hope Center, which would be a separate building.
Okay. So the building that's going to be constructed on 3, 5, 7, and 9 Cunningham Avenue.
Yes, sir.
Has that been funded, or are we with the construction of that?
Not in totality. We have some funding through the federal government that we plan to allocate towards the construction of that.
Okay.
We are working with planning right now on zoning such that we can maximize density of that site. And so within the next, hopefully 60 days, an RFP will go out so that we can get development partners involved to help build the units there.
Okay. And then a follow-up question, have you looked at the incremental cost of adding this space into that building that you would build on 3, 5, 7, and 9 Cunningham Avenue? Is that an option?
We've looked at that as well. And that was a consideration several months ago when we submitted a proposal to the City Committee of City Council. So that could be an option as well. Naturally, when we think about adding that into the multifamily units that we will build, we're looking at 2 to 3 years before that goes vertical. So then where are we going is the question. Are we asking that we stay at 529 for that period of time would be the question for us. I guess for me, more specifically.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Absolutely.
And if we can do that, okay, and truly have a mixed income development, which is much healthier than a concentration of lower income persons, I think that would also come off better if there was a way for us to have some market rate in there as well, as long as we don't get to that tilting point, as all we know, somewhere around 40%. Once it goes beyond 40%, the whole thing could go. But I'm just thinking if there is a way that we could get our zoning to be consistent with what I see right next door. There are 10, 12-story buildings right next to it. And so to come up with a plan that would provide us with resources to help pay for it. Just your thoughts on that approach.
Councilmember Gregory, that is an option. I would just say typically when we're looking at financing structures for affordable and workforce housing, they're slightly different than the market rate housing. So we can pursue tax credits, low income housing tax credits. We can also pursue other federal dollars. We would have to pursue separate funding, either from investment partners or from private financiers in order to capitalize market rate housing as a part of that structure. As you all know, when Don Cameron, the Housing Authority now under Art Milligan's management, they go up to 150% of the area median income. Their financing is private financing. It's a rarity that you will find. Now they're looking at low income housing tax credits under RAD, but most of their financing is from Bank of America, Wells Fargo. They tend not to go to the federal dollars or state dollars because it allows them the flexibility to go to a higher AMI. That would have to be a consideration as we put this out.
Have you considered FHA maybe 221D3?
We have looked at that, not extensively for this particular deal, but we have looked at that in the past.
Thank you.
Sure.
Questions? Yes, Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Just two quick questions. Have we looked at any rundown existing city property buildings and rehabbing any of that?
Yes, the city does not have any available at this time.
Okay. Again, I mean, Councilmember Gregory has already touched on this, a few others, but if we kept the offices there, renting them, and I mean, you've obviously looked into this a lot, but if we spent the 1.3 million for, actual housing units for them rather than just for the office space, because from what I understand, this is strictly for the offices, correct?
Correct. So
could those dollars be spent?
No, $1 million of the 1.3 million is from private donations. And those private donations were garnered around the idea that we would build a Hope Center. So they gave their money because a part of the Mayor's Commission's goal is to build a center, because this was part of their vision from the beginning. So that $1 million is slated specifically for the Hope Center.
For offices.
Right, correct. Was just a part, yes.
$1 million has to be used on offices.
1 million has to be used on the Hope Center. And so part of what the Hope Center does is offer offices so nonprofit organizations can come in those offices and provide services to unsheltered residents who will also come in order to access those services.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Will there be showers and all that stuff at that center?
Eventually, for now, Catholic Charities has a mobile shower that they're willing to bring in. They have been at the Navigation Center periodically, but they want to be a part of addressing this issue. And so they have a mobile shower that they want to bring over so that folks can get to the showers. Right now at the Navigation Center, the showers are upstairs. If you walk upstairs in the Navigation Center, you will fall out because it's so hot and humid up there because the AC is not working properly.
Thank you for that answer. Any other? Council Member Mitchell.
No, I'm just going to say that what we are talking about today is the establishing another center, what we call Hope Center. And I was involved in this from the beginning and just trying to keeping it on a low level until we really go through it. We were talking about homelessness, and we were talking about homelessness ever since I was here. And with the Hope Center, where we have the resource center now, the Navigation Center, if you may, we cannot stay there too much longer. I'm telling you that now. You know, he was gracious enough to let us stay there and use it for what we were using it for now, but that time is getting ready to expire because they are planning on doing some other things with their property also. So we're gonna have to get out of there. And that building that we are talking about now on Connington Avenue, I went in that building more than one time, period of time. It's a building that we can use for what we have, with the need that we have for it. And I looked at it a whole lot. I mean, I don't know how many of you have been there, but I've been there many times in that particular building, upstairs also. And that building is there, and we can utilize that building. We are talking about money that we are saying that, oh, it costs this, it costs that. Nothing in the city of Charleston that if you own something that you're going to sell it for what you bought for it during that time. It's not that way anymore in the city of Charleston. I've been here all this time, and my house right on King Street right now, where it is right now, I was offered $850,000 for my property on King Street. And I didn't pay no $850,000 for it, you know. And so this is what it is. Times have changed in the city of Charleston. Everything in the city of Charleston is expensive. Even what you're building up here on Meeting Street up in the Neck area, which is the district I represent, and I'm all over in that area every day. That area right now, they talk about the graveyard is there. The graveyard, the people's not coming up to walk around. They're in the grave anyway. They're resting. But anyway, that area is changing. You see the building that's right next door to is going up with 12 stories or whatever. That have changed the dynamic of that area altogether. And you have other buildings coming up there. That's going to be expensive area because everything is moving northward from the city of Charleston, because in the peninsula city, if you may, right now, the properties right now is just about null and void. We don't have too many more properties around in this peninsula anymore. Even you're looking at right now, you're going to have a hotel coming right down the corner of Meeting and Morrison Drive, if you may. That's going to change the dynamic of that area. You have the Longshoreman Union Hall building. That's going to be developing pretty soon. That's coming on board pretty soon because it was sold already. We don't know what's going to happen there. We don't know what the person's going to put there. But everything is moving northward, and everything is going to be very expensive. We don't have any more buildings around here, right in the peninsula city of Charleston, that we can go and do any developing in the May, if you may, right now. So if the cost to even buy or purchase a building and to renovate a building to what we need it for, it's going to cost. It's going to cost. And the money right now that they're talking about, the money, $1 million of it, it's not coming from us. It's not coming from the city. It's not coming from the city. So if we're going to help people with homelessness and having these programs in there, we need to start moving, and we stop, speculating this or speculating that. It's time for us to move on. I don't get into foolishness. I don't get into nothing at all. I look at these things in the vision that what we need to have homelessness. I see the homelessness all over the east side, all over the city of Charleston. They're out there, and they need to have information, someone to guide them to what they need to have to make a livable self for them, livable, just to be able to live comfortably. So this is what it is. I wish all apartments could come down. We were talking about high rate housing. We got a lot of high rate housing here. We got a place right on what they call on Baker Hospital Drive. My daughter stayed there 2 years ago. And she moved and she bought a house in Latson because she can't stay in the city of Charleston. But two years ago, 3-bedroom there in that apartment was $900. Then it went up to $1,000. Today, right now, today is $1,500 a month. That's what it costs in that apartment complex on Baker Hospital Drive. That to show you how this rent is moving and how it's escalating. And that's an apartment complex. You're not living in a house, it's apartment, you see? And so this is what's happening. So if we got the opportunity of getting this building, to me, and I'm going to support it. I don't know what you all are going to do, but I'm going to support it because I was involved in it from day one and I see the need of it. And right now the building is there. We can move in that building probably tomorrow if that takes place and start the programs going on. And that's what I'm looking at now. We are moving on. I'm not going to be here that much longer. None of us going to be here that much longer. So we got to get things, put things in place, set it in place now, and just move on. You see, and that's what I'm looking. That's what I'm saying. So, it's up to you all. You brought your own conviction, but I'm supporting it. Thank you.
Councilman Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we've been talking about on the floor is basically an evolving business plan. And we don't have anything written in front of us as to what this whole navigation center is going to cost services once it gets to fruition. And we cannot ad-lib our way to that. Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you for recusing yourself. Technically, you're right. You didn't have to do it. So I want to thank you for that. Because it allows us to concentrate on the item that's before us. And the item before us is to buy an office building, in my opinion, that's grossly overpriced. And when that was brought up a month ago, it was a great suggestion from Councilman Sacklin to get another appraisal. And we've gotten that second appraisal. And that second appraisal shows an increase in excess of 26% in 1 month. That appraiser wants this council to believe that that property increased 26% in 1 month. And if you extrapolate that forward, that's an excess of a 300% increase in 12 months. That's one of the most valuable sites in appreciating property this side of the Mississippi. They want us to believe that. One of the issues with this to begin with is all the information was not provided to council. And we are entitled as a council to have the exact same information when it comes to appropriating taxpayers' dollars that the mayor has, that staff has, that the legal team has. All 12 council members are entitled to that so we can make good decisions on others' behalf. We pray before every council meeting. Actually, we pray before every meeting, committee meetings, etc. And in those prayers, someplace along the way is included praying for the least of those. And we mean that in the heart of our hearts. And I hear you, Councilmember Mitchell. And I wrote it down, if you're going to help, and I put down, you don't overspend. Because that's how you get the most, it's called cost effectiveness out of the dollar. Being stewards of other people's money is a privilege. And that's what we have as being representatives of the taxpayers. And when it comes to representing donated dollars, that's even a higher threshold. When we looked at the facts of the appraisal, 75% of the property in the block that this property is in has been very active. And it's been selling for very affordable prices. But I believe there were at least 9 or 10 comparables where the two appraisers sought comparable buildings to compare this to. In each case, they went south. They passed the property right next door that the city bought. And let me say this about the city's purchase. The property was originally listed, and I have the listing agreement. I've sent that out to the mayor and you, Mr. Shaw Johnson, and all council members. February 21st, 2017, this property was listed for $1,900,000, the property that the city bought. 1.1 acres. It had 4 houses on it with almost 6,800 square feet of buildings. Those buildings have since been torn down. The property sold for $1,425,000, a discount in one of the hottest real estate markets in America of 25%. So then we moved to the corner of Meeting and Cunnington. The appraiser both saw fit not to include that. It was a commercial piece of property. It was 1426. By the way, can we get the actual site up on the screen here so we can have something to look at? Can we do that? Can we put up 11 Cunnington on this screen? That property sold in October for $675,000, a very affordable price, and the site was 3 times larger than 11 Cunnington from a property standpoint. Cunnington Avenue is 0.08 of an acre. The corner of Meeting and Cunnington is 0.23 of an acre, almost 3 times. Well, can we have the actual overhead Google shot from Meeting Street coming into Cunnington? There's a site on the corner of Meeting and Pershing. It sold December of 2021 for $667,000. Again, both appraisers said, we're not going to use those values. We're going to go south and get comparables. You don't have to be an expert in real estate in this area to know that if you start north on the peninsula and as you drive south, the properties go up. They're more expensive. The closer you get towards the Battery, the more expensive properties are. In no case did the appraiser say, we're going to go north. And this is why. You would get lower values, which will calculate a lower value for the building in question. Those numbers are not believable. And we're going to use other people's monies to buy that. That's wrong. There's something called a golden rule. Do unto others, and we know that one. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you yourself. There's something also called a platinum rule. As you do unto others, you do better for them than you would do for yourself. And that's the role I submit that we're in. We all want to help the homeless. We all want to get the most bang out of the dollars that we can. The center that Mrs. Johnson describes, the building that you can build and put a shower in and warming space and laundry. Why wouldn't we take those monies and start building, making plans to build that building as soon as possible? In particular, if we told the person with the navigation center that we got plans on the way to build a building designed more energy efficient, handicap accessible for the employees and the homeless. Why don't we take that 1.3 million and put it towards that? I've noticed on this floor, even during this discussion, as suggestions would come forward, butts and pushback is part of the rationale. This building basically and this building only. We can do better than this. We can do better if we were to take, and when I spoke to Councilmember Ross on Sunday about this, he brought up the term transition. We need to help them with their transition. He's right. Right now, we are, by not having a plan, the plan may be mental and the plan may be verbalized.
We have a plan.
Has council members had that plan?
No, you have not. You saw an initial proposal, but you don't have the plan, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
You're welcome.
It's amazing as when it comes to not buying this building, the additional information we could get. How do you get the better practices if you don't have a plan? And I believe you, we have one. I'm looking forward to seeing it. And I'm looking forward for my fellow council members to see it. So hopefully we can get, if it's not the best thing since sliced bread, maybe we can add a little peanut butter and jelly to it. That said, taking the dollars and putting it towards building a facility that's designed for it. It doesn't have to be in a 10-story building. Just as you all we're looking at 11 Cunnington. The red dot is 11 Cunnington. The building to the left, at least my left on that, was 9 Cunnington. It was a house that was torn down. At the last meeting, we had a drawing showing a building that would have the showers and the laundry and all of that being right next door. We could do that on 3 Cunnington or 9 Cunnington. The reason council acted in an expedient manner to buy 3579 Connington, 1.1 acres because it was a great price. And staff did a good job negotiating a great price. And council reacted. Those dollars have been appropriated. But I don't know any place in America where an office building surrounded by graveyards. And if we can get a pullback shot on that, if we can get all the way out to Meeting Street, you'll see what I mean. Thank you. Well, that's a lot of graveyards. Come on, thank you. Again, if you look at the corner of Cunnington and Meeting, so you come to the left of the red dot all the way back out to Meeting Street, that's the site that sold in December for 667. I'm sorry, it sold in October of 19 for 675,000. If you go one block on the corner of Pershing and Meeting, that sold December 13th for $667,000. Now it is twice the size of, and faces on Meeting Street, much higher profile location. And let me tell you, getting closer to Meeting Street, if the city or the nonprofit ever needs an exit strategy, you have a chance of recouping your investment. I dare say that if we were to pay 1.3 million for 11 Cunnington, it will be very, very difficult to have an exit strategy simply if you say, well, you know what, we want to go in another location. This doesn't work. Programmatic funding was withdrawn. We need to exit that building. It'd be very difficult to get that property. So that price. I think we take the money and we go towards building the facility that the standalone facility with the showers and the laundry and the warming area if needed. And we can get there sooner if we started planning with those dollars now, as opposed to buying an overpriced building and then having to accumulate more money to build the building that's actually the one that the homeless people will actually use. Can I wrap it up?
Yeah.
I put on a motion, I'm gonna put a motion on the floor to deny buying 11 Cunnington Avenue for $1.3 million. I'll second.
It's been moved and properly.
Councilmember, I would just want to add a comment, please, sir.
Yes, it's been moved, it's been properly seconded. And the motion is that we do not buy 11
Cunnington for $1.3 million.
For $1.3 million.
Yes, sir.
So I just wanted to add, because Councilmember Waring indicated a plan. When we moved into 529 Meeting Street, we had a plan. The Mayor's Commission worked extensively with a number of nonprofit organizations, and I was at the table to facilitate a plan. Our goal, because we understood going in that we were renting that facility, was to be able to facilitate a program and an initiative such that when we were able to move into a longer term building that was sustained by ownership, that we would be able to lift our initiative up and move it to its new location. And so we have been planning. We look at an annual budget and we work very closely with our nonprofit partners to help minimize to the city of Charleston those cost outlays. And so even as we move forward in this, the goal would be to minimize cost outlays. However, in order to fortify and sustain such a facility for the long term, we believed it important, and you supported funding for this such that we could hire staff, because we know that the homelessness issue and sheltered individuals in our community is not getting any easier. And so in order to move this to the next level, those were efforts that were undertaken such that we could do this appropriately. So I just wanted to make those comments. Thank you.
Just one comment from me. The current Navigation Center at least have showers, washerette, And we're going to a building where we would have to do that mobily. That in and of itself concerns me. That there will be services that the current, though not adequate, provides not be in a building that we're purchasing for 1.3 million. Councilman.
Well, I have a quick question about that. Can you zoom in? Please? Sorry. Always should say please. Well, where are you gonna do that?
You mean
On that property?
Well, this building's gone.
Okay.
We own it.
So we're gonna, I mean, will the zoning allow us to do that?
I mean, I just wanted to make sure that we knew that, you know, where we going would not have the services that the current navigation center has built.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear the question from Councilmember Seekins.
Seeking, where would the, he asked if we have to have a mobile services,
Sure.
where would they go?
There is parking on the side of that building. So if need be, he could park there in order to facilitate that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to amend my motion, given the information you just gave, which was very pertinent. My motion is to not buy 11 Cunnington Avenue because they don't have even the limited services we have at the current location. We really need to build what we'd like to build. So my motion, I'd like to amend my motion, if you would be kind enough to second that, amend it to not buy 11.
So you're taking back the first motion.
I said not buy for 1.3 million.
Right.
What I'd like to say now is not buying it because too much adjustments have to be made.
Do I hear a second on that?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Councilman Bowers.
Can we just vote on the agenda item? I mean, like, we're gonna take two votes, right? If we vote on yours and we have to vote on the agenda item again? No? Okay.
Okay, in other words, vote whether to, okay. I think what you're saying is that if we are going to deny it, the votes won't be there to approve it in 16. So vote on the original motion. I'm with you. I'm following you. Now, where we are, okay, is, all right, this is where we are, because your motion was seconded. And I think we have to vote on that motion.
As a point of order, you can ask that it be unanimously withdrawn, and as long as there's not an objection, the motion's considered withdrawn, and then we can move forward with what Councilmember Bowden had suggested.
Okay, all right.
Really doesn't matter.
Okay, all right. So where we are, okay, on item 16, as written, which is a request for approval to authorize, et cetera, et cetera. So we all on the same page. All in favor of item 16.
Request a roll
I'm
call.
sorry.
Pardon.
Excuse
There's no
me.
motion? I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
I'm getting confused too. Okay.
So there is a motion on the floor by Councilmember Waring, which was seconded by Councilmember Shealy, to not buy 11 Cunnington. Is that motion still on the floor, or did you withdraw that motion?
Let's keep it on the floor.
Okay. Okay.
Point of order. Has anybody made a motion to approve item 16?
No,
That's-
no.
Right.
So the motion on the floor, which has been seconded, would you read that for me, Madam Clerk?
The motion made by Councilmember Waring and seconded by Councilmember Shealy is to not buy 11 Cunnington.
Any discussion? Yes, Councilman.
There's been a lot of great points that have been made on all sides and all perspectives of this discussion. And I would just like to throw out one other consideration. You know, I do a lot of zoning and land use representation, and a lot of times, you know, certain types of development, to put it mildly, is not warmly received around certain neighborhoods, right? I mean, shoot, regular affordable housing is controversial. a lot of places, okay? And you get something called the NIMBY effect, right? Where people start lighting us up, opposing things. They start showing up at these, BZA meetings and all these other kinds of things, worried about traffic and all these pretextual issues, but sometimes we all know what's going on. Well, let me tell you something. You try to put the navigation center over in District 11, Wagner Terrace, you want to put it on Daniel Island. People aren't going to like that. So my point in all this is, is there a better plan out there somewhere? Maybe. I'm just saying the universe of potential properties in the city of Charleston is not as broad and as wide as other certain types of development, just because of frankly, the politics of it. And I think Ms. Shaw Johnson expressed it earlier. I mean, the homeless, it's a charged issue. We've all heard about it. So I just throw that out there for what it's worth. But I mean, shoot, Councilman Waring and we had a long discussion about this over the weekend. He raises a lot of good points. I truly think he's, his heart is in the right place. He's coming from the right place. He wants to make this money stretch as far as it can go. And in furtherance of the platinum rule, which I'm gonna copy that in the future. That's good stuff. So I'm very torn on it. I see good arguments and perspectives on all sides. I just thought it would be beneficial to throw that consideration out there, that there's not an enormous universe of properties or communities, frankly, or neighborhoods, frankly, where this will be warmly received with open arms. And that's maybe why you got to put it next to some graveyards, frankly. Those people can't complain. So just a thought there. I don't know how I'm going to vote as I sit here today, right now.
And by the way, NIMBY stands for not in my backyard. Any further?
I did, Mr.
Oh,
Chairman.
I'm sorry, council member.
Councilmember Rappel, thank you for that comment. And I think that's sort of been the pink elephant in the room, and you brought it up. But I'm going to recount a experience I had when I served on the stormwater, of all things, task force when we were doing the manual. And somebody on that committee, when we were thinking about the stormwater manual, suggested that we come up with substandard standards when it came to affordable housing. And I raised a stink about it. And I'm going to raise a stink about what you just said. We have to quit treating people who are homeless as second-class citizens. And we had to quit thinking in this mindset that because they're homeless, or because they live in substandard housing, or because they don't live in housing, that they are entitled to something less than what we live in. We go to the point that someone wanted to stick affordable housing on areas that flood, because they thought, well, that's just too damn bad. They can live in substandard housing and we could have lower standards. Too bad that the area floods. And so if we're thinking that this is okay to buy this property to stick homeless people in because nobody else is going to live in it because it's next to a cemetery, that's the wrong mindset to have on this. And we should be a party to that. Now, remember when Daniel Island was developed and they put affordable housing out there on 7 Farms Road, there was a stink about it, but they did it. There is affordable housing on Daniel Island because the mandate out there at the time was to make sure that that was taking place. So our vote should not be, we need to buy this because there ain't no other place to buy because
Correct.
someone's going to want this in their backyard. We can't be a party to that. This simply is very distinctly, as Councilman Moran said, a business decision.
Correct.
Period. This is a business decision. Is this a good deal for the city or not? That's what your vote needs to be on tonight. Not any other extraneous information, not any other extraneous issues dealing with. My vote tonight is going to be on this. Is this a good use? Are we being good stewards of public funds to buy this property? Period. And that's the focus that we should have. So whenever you vote on this thing, I ask you to just look at it from that standpoint. Thank you.
Call for the question.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, do you want to do a roll call vote?
We can.
Will you restate the motion just so we're clear? Because I know there's been some confusion.
Would you restate it, please?
The motion is not to buy 11 Cunnington.
All right, everybody understands the motion? Okay, all in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
We're gonna do a roll call?
Councilmember Gregg,
Aye.
Councilmember Shealy,
Aye.
Councilmember Saccharin, Councilmember Mitchell. That was a nay. Councilmember Brady,
Nay.
Councilmember Gregory,
Aye.
Councilmember Waring, Councilmember Seekings, Councilmember Shade, Councilmember Bowden, Councilmember Appel,
Oh, come on, man. Councilmember Parker.
Aye.
and the mayor has abstained. The motion passes.
Is there,
7-5.
is there anything else to come before this committee? And just get ready, because Ways and Means is gonna be a little different. I'm just telling you guys. It's gonna take a little longer than 15, 20 minutes as we go forward. This meeting. Okay.